It is Earl from G3 Campus Therapy Network, and I am here with Michael Komorn, and you are watching Kickin' It with Komorn at Komorn's office. And today, we're going to go through some of the top news and headlines.
Police raid two businesses accused of selling marijuana illegally. This is a headline, of course, because as we all know that in Michigan, in December of 2018, the voters approved recreational marijuana. And the idea that there would be police raids at these businesses accused of selling marijuana would seem to be shocking or something completely against the understanding of what the current law is. In particular, these facilities were allowing the commercial sale of marijuana to adults under the premise of recreational marijuana. No cards were required. And to try to unravel this and get an understanding of what may have happened and what the thinking was in light of the legalization of marijuana, this is an issue that some may have anticipated, but it is those persons that are operating without licenses or outside of what has now been defined by the administrative rules and the MRTMA passing of the recreational law. And this behavior is what one could say is a competition to the licensed businesses. I mean, to say that this raid and the announcement of these raids taking place at the same time we have our first statistics of the amount of recreational sales of marijuana, what type of tax revenue it brought to the state. I think the figures were $2 million in sales, maybe 200,000, something to that effect of tax revenue brought to the state. From an objective perspective, from the state's objective perspective, they're targeting these places as taking money out of the state's pocket. This is unfortunately or fortunately what you get when you tax and regulate cannabis. And in particular, when they came out with the administrative rules of this past year, defining what kind of licenses would be available, if
you mind me pausing just for 1 second. So we're talking about the article of the facilities that were caught selling recreational marijuana without a license.
That is correct.
And there was two businesses?
There was two businesses, as reported in the newspaper.
And this is also in the context of, we just went recreational on December 1st. A couple stores did 221,000 in one day, and I believe the first week, or first 8 days was like 1.6 million. And then now people are getting raided, and some are asking a question too. I thought we legalized it.
That's right.
How are we still getting raided?
Well, as I said, as we just compared these two factors, these facilities, the state would argue, and police would argue, and I don't need to make arguments for them, but just as we're discussing this, would take the position that the places that were raided were not contributing to the $1.6 million worth of sales. There's no transparency there. There's no metric system that the cannabis that's coming in and being sold is tested and or accounted for in terms of revenue. And if you don't have licensed businesses, then there's less of a drive maybe under these circumstances to seek and or raid these facilities. But in particular, the administrative rules give us some insight too as to why these places are being, these two places in particular were raided. In Rule 58, Section 3, it says specifically, a person that allows consumption of marijuana products on the premises of a non-residential location and charges a fee for entry, sells goods or services while individuals are consuming on the premises, or requires memberships for entry shall acquire designated consumption establishment or temporary marijuana event license. So this is one of the areas that may be in the realm that they're trying to stop if there's consumption taking place at one of these locations. Obviously, there are certain types of licenses that are necessary in order to sell cannabis, both for recreational and for medical purposes, pursuant to the rules set forth in the MMFLA and now under the MRTMA.
So now, I'm sorry, but so now, Komorn, so say right now, it has been recreational or adult use for over a year now. And we're just December 1st, 2019, was more the first recreational sales that can happen at a licensed facility.
That's correct.
But before that, where did people get their cannabis?
There was not a, right, the answer is there was not a location or store that would allow that. People were relying on their traditional methods of obtaining cannabis, either medical marijuana patients and caregivers, or from a source that would not necessarily be authorized by state law.
And now we're talking about news articles right now, and there has been a lot of news articles about gifting. People were selling chocolate or books, and with that, you will so happen to get cannabis with that purchase, which, according to the rules, how were these places getting rated? Were they kind of trying to operate underneath a gifting scenario? And the state's kind of saying, no, we don't like that? Or is it more of them being out publicly in the open, like a more retail store transactions?
Well, the article reports that there were sales that were taking place there. And this is occurring apparently at a time when there are licenses that are necessary to do the same behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is more significant now because of the fact that there is a recreational law and there's a way and method to get a license to do this behavior. And because of that, I think, is why a place like these two places are in play for law enforcement to want to shut down. Another interesting question, I think, is what is going to happen here? Are they going to charge the individuals criminally? If so, under what theory?
Right.
Are they not just subject to some kind of license, operating without a license, or some kind of administrative punishment? Or are they going to consider these crimes that would be in the traditional sense outside of MRTMA and default back to the Public Health Code, dare I say that? But, it's interesting to me also that this is in Genesee County. And Genesee County is, for all purposes, has been an area that we could call the green zone or green bubble.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of caregivers and patients up there, and there's a lot of activity that is not interfered with law enforcement. I've had a lot of houses with people getting raided, caregivers and whatnot, which doesn't make any sense. But I don't think David Layton has made this a priority per se in his prosecution. I do think that this is something that arises more out of and is reported as the state police, not necessarily, Genesee County. This could be a drug task force that's involved here. It's not really clear, but it is seemingly head up by the Michigan State Police, which is an arm or branch of the Attorney General's office, and would certainly be through that office that would be directing this, or maybe it's through Lara, and Lara's, maybe it's a direct use of Lara's resources in enforcing those people that are operating outside of the license. It's still too early to tell, and of course, way too early to tell whether or not criminal charges are going to be forthcoming or not. But it is something that's certainly interesting enough that people should be aware of, and I think by pointing out what the dynamics are within the community and how Lara is dealing with this. And I think most interestingly is how, you have this inevitable divide within the cannabis community. You have, commercial operation businesses that are trying to, they're playing by the state's rules, and there's people that have been participating in this activity forever. They're the ones that have been, carrying the loads, one would speak, for supplying cannabis all these years and are not licensed. And, there's an eternal rift now that will exist because this is what happens when you get tax and regulate. There's a line that's drawn for behavior that's acceptable, that the government's transparent about and is going to be aware of and make sure they get their piece. And then there's, as the state would say, everybody else. So it's interesting times right now, and we're certainly going to be watching this to see what develops. But the battle over marijuana seemingly continues, and I think we should all remember it's just a plant.
Stay tuned for more Kickin' with Komorn news, and we will catch you next time.
Hi, I'm attorney Michael Komorn with Komorn Law, PLLC. I'm here with Earl Carruthers today in another episode of Kickin with Komorn. We're now going to do our tip of the week, which is never, and I mean never, admit to the police that you have been smoking marijuana. Why do I say this? Well, one of the issues that remains after the recreational law passed is going to be the driving issues and how police are going to administer and regulate that area of traffic, quote-unquote, traffic safety. And as we've seen and have been watching things develop, there's a number of different factors that are being contemplated and utilized as tools in the enforcement of, quote-unquote, traffic safety in the era of recreational marijuana. And I've talked a lot about the field sobriety testing and the drug recognition evaluators. And one of the other things that can sometimes come out during this traffic encounter is that you may be asked the question, when was the last time you smoked marijuana? And if you're asked this question, I'm going to suggest to you that the officer's already triggering in or investigating you in some capacity for marijuana use while you're driving. So by answering that question under any circumstances in the giving a time, place, or method, you are providing evidence that will be used against you later on. Understand there's different things that go into the totality of the circumstances that will be your case if you are arrested. If your case has in it behavior and evidence that is antagonistic to the idea that you were driving impaired or under the influence, yet there's a statement that one makes about the recent use of marijuana, then that's a factor that's in the mess that in the totality will go against you. It's a reason for the officer to investigate further. It's a reason for the officer to want to get a blood draw, and that brings a whole other slew of issues of whether you consent or not. And if and when they do get it and you have consumed cannabis within that period of time and is triggered by you admitting this, then there's going to be some random amount of THC that has no bearing on what the whether you were impaired or not, but it's another piece of the puzzle of the totality of the evidence that will be used against you in court. So the reason why I say never admit to the police that you've been smoking marijuana is because it doesn't have any relevance whatsoever as to their investigation of what's taking place. And the presence of it in your system is not something that is relevant for this particular investigation. And by doing so, you're making an admission that will be used against you in court.
So, Komorn, we know we do not want to admit to any consumption of marijuana if we were pulled over and asked. What are some good ways to even respond in a way where it doesn't maybe spark any further or make things worse?
In regards to a question such as, have you been smoking marijuana?
Exactly.
No, officer, I have not been smoking any marijuana.
Okay.
Or, no, I don't know why you would ask for that.
Okay. What about, because some people may say, hey, I plead the fifth.
Yeah.
And then it sounds a little too more fishy, or...
That's fine, but I mean, to everyone who is listening and wants advice, they should think about it, what's going to sound like coming out of their mouth. I don't think the first time you should be thinking about it and articulating what you're going to say should be in the moment when you're asked the question. Right. Think about it now, think about it before it happens, and hopefully it won't happen, but at least be ready what to say. The key words are, in this situation, am I under arrest, officer? Am I free to leave? That's always a way to determine whether or not you are being seized or there's a reason for them to keep you there. The other one is that, with all due respect, I don't answer any questions without my lawyer. And you can always throw it off at something like that. Somewhere in that realm, you find your own wording and politely you can say those things and just let them know that you're aware of what your rights are. Not in a hostile way, but just let them know that you're not going to be making any statements to them. They probably get much worse, and a lot of times ask those questions and people are cooperative and maybe choose against them, maybe they let them go. But it is always important to be practical. You don't want to start a fight. You want to be immediately antagonistic. Evaluate the circumstances. Sometimes a polite yes or no can get you out of there. But if you feel like an investigation is taking place, make sure you're prepared to invoke your, rights by saying, "Am I free to leave, officer? Am I free to leave? Am I under arrest?" And I'm not answering any questions without my lawyer.
And there you have it. Pretty short and simple. We're not trying to promote or condone you to consume and drive, but if it does happen, these are some options.
Don't drive impaired, but don't make admissions to law enforcement officers when you don't have to. Remember, at the time of the traffic stop, everything you say will be used against you. Don't answer any questions that are going to be used against you. Use your best judgment, be practical, but at the time of a traffic stop, the only things that you're required to do are provide a valid license, proof of insurance, and proof of registration. Any questions that where you're going, do you know what crimes you were committing, should be thought about and not responded to with admissions of guilt of any kind. That is your tip of the week.
What he said. And you're watching Kickin' It with Komorn. Stay tuned for the next episode.